We're starting in Joshua 9. So when we ended up, Joshua and crew had just conquered all the people of Ai and destroyed the city, and then they had that thing where they stood on two mountains, and the mountain of blessing, mountain of cursing. And they just have heard the whole law again. So now it's time to get back to conquering the land.
Yeah.
So when an enemy is defeated, they have two choices. It's the fight or flight thing. You can either surrender
Or join.
or, well, surrendering for them is joining, or you can throw everything into the battle. And in this chapter, we're going to see both examples. So let's look at verses 1 and 2. And I'm coming this way this time.
As soon as all the kings who were beyond the Jordan in the hill country and in the lowland all along the coast of the Great Sea towards Lebanon, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites heard of this, they gathered together as one to fight against Joshua and Israel.
Well, now, doesn't that make a lot of sense? All these ites,
Yeah.
they have the melted hearts now, and they realize they are in big trouble. Yeah. So they decide they're going to team up, and that could be a problem because that would mean a lot of them. Now, normally these guys fight against each other a lot, but this time they're talking about teaming up together all through Canaan. Problem is, if you look at the map where they've come, the Israelites have come through, they have come through the middle of that country. So they've essentially split this country in two, the north and the south. So kind of hard for these guys to unite with these guys. But their intention is to do that. All of them, except one group, the Gibeonites. And by the way, all the ites never do unite. We are going to see groups of them, but never all of them. They couldn't get over their problems enough to fight as one. But the Gibeonites are not part of that group. So verse 3 through 6.
However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho, Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. The men put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal and said to him and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us."
So they know they are not going to win against the Israelites. Now, their city is another one of those big walled cities. But after Jericho, they know can't trust those walls. Now, this city is between Bethel and Jerusalem, and it's a really important city. In fact, this Gibeon.
Oh.
It's also the name of the area. They have the city of Gibeon and then the area of Gibeon. It's really important along the routes. So they decide, okay.
It's a long ways away.
What?
If you look at it, it's way to the left, right?
This is on the other side of, it's on the other side of the Jordan.
See it way over here.
No, here's Jericho, here's Gibeon.
Yeah.
It's a long, I mean, it seems like a long way.
When you consider the country is, 30 miles wide?
Yeah, it's not very far.
That's not that far. Yeah, it's nothing's that far away. So they decide they're going to be tricky. They're going to deceive the Israelites. Now, Israel was strictly forbidden to make treaties with any of those ites. But it didn't say they couldn't make treaties with outside nations. So the Gibeonites are going to pretend to be an outside nation. Now, Gibeon was about 25 miles from where they were. But they were probably going to be the next on the list to go, because they were on the way. And it's only 6 more miles to Jerusalem. Now, they get all dressed up like they are coming from a long distance. They had it covered even down to the donkeys. Make it look like the donkeys have come a long way. Wineskins. So wineskins were usually made from the skin of an animal with their hair shaved off, and then they turned it inside out. And the neck of the animal was the neck of the bottle. That's why we call the bottle the neck of a bottle, the neck. Because it used to be necks, real necks. Now, when they're new, they're pretty stretchy. And you can put wine in it, it'll ferment, and the skin will expand. When they're old, they don't expand anymore and they break. So they're bringing these old skins to make it look like they've been out on the road. Does any of you have a version that says that the donkey's shoes are clouded? C-L-O-U-T-E-D. Hi, Betty. That was not a good interpretation of the word. That was a word used in 17th century England, meaning when your shoes were so bad off, you stuck a nail in them to stick them together. So that's not what they're talking about. They got worn out shoes and everything else. They didn't cloud them, but they were worn out. So they could say, oh, we've come from such a long distance and we want to have a treaty with you. Now, remember, Joshua just reviewed the law with all of Israel. So he's just heard it himself again. And they're thinking, okay, we're going to move on victoriously. And then, boom, he's sideswiped. He's caught off guard. He doesn't go to God. Now, there's some problems with the Gibeonite story, if they had really thought about it. If they were coming from a far country to make a treaty, they didn't plan their trip very well, because they would have brought enough supplies. They would have brought enough supplies to make their bread, because they usually made their bread at least every other day. No, they're carrying around moldy bread. No, a traveler would not do that. They would, if they were coming to make a treaty, they would have brought gifts. They would have brought a good change of clothes, so that when if you were representing your country to another country, you got dressed up. So if Joshua, and how much experience do they have with meeting people from other countries? But, an experienced person would have said, something's wrong with your story. So, let's see their response in verses 7 through 13.
The Israelites replied to these Hivites, "How do we know you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty with you." They replied, "We are your servants." "But who are you?" Joshua demanded. "Where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord your God and of all he did in Egypt. We have also heard what he did to the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all our people instructed us, 'Take supplies for a long journey. Go meet with the people of Israel and tell them, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us.'"
Through 13.
"This bread was hot from the ovens when we left our homes, but now, as you can see, it is dry and moldy. These wineskins were new when we built them. But now they were old and split open, and our clothing and sandals are worn out from our very long journey.
So
The
see,
story's getting worse.
Yeah.
yeah, if you thought about it,
Really?
there's holes in their story all over the place. Okay, notice it calls them Hivites in the beginning. So Gibeon is a part of the Hivites. Now, back in Deuteronomy 20, verse 17, God specifically said, don't make treaties with the Hivites.
Oh, and they say they're.
Well, they don't
Oh, they don't say.
they don't say it, but they are. And there's some Israelites that are skeptic. They're saying, how do we know? And then they give the story. They're not skeptic enough. They don't really check it out. They don't take it to God. Notice in verse 7, the Israelites say, how can we make a covenant with you? They never really answer the question. They don't say how they can make a covenant with them. They give them all these reasons why they're good people, why they've come so far. And now the Gibeonites offer to become slaves in exchange for protection. This is a protection treaty, kind of like NATO. And the word here for slave is slave. Someone, not a bondservant. This would be a slave for life. Only Israelite slaves were freed every 7 years. These are slaves become slaves for life. In verse 9, they say they heard of the name of the Lord. For these pagans, the name of a God was so important. The name of God is important. So they're saying the name of their God showed that God's power. So they have heard the name of God the Almighty. They've heard of Yahweh. They've heard of his greatness and his power that his name brings. Then they say, we've heard about all your victories. Notice what victories they don't talk about. They don't talk about Jericho or Ai, because they're pretending to be from out of the country. If they know about Jericho and Ai, they're going to go, how do you guys know about that? You're from over there. So they are really sneaky. Some ways really smart, some ways not, but it works.
Being a little bit hypocritical.
But deception. Stupid.
Yeah.
Was deception.
Yeah, so they only talk about things on the other side of the Jordan, not things, not their neighbors.
So I guess they were smart enough to do that.
Yeah, they were. Well, and the Israelites were dumb enough to fall for the other stuff. Okay, verse 14 and 15.
Then the men of Israel asked counsel of the Lord. Excuse me. I'm sorry, let me start again.
Yeah.
Then the men of Israel took some of their provisions, but they did not ask counsel of the Lord. So Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live, and the rulers of the congregation swore to them.
Okay, so they fell for this image. They fell for the lies. What Jericho couldn't do with walls and Ai couldn't do with weapons, they did with deceit. It's kind of like the way Satan works. If one way doesn't work, he's going to try another way. He's going to keep going.
Change. His tactics the same today.
Yep. Notice there's no mention of a king for the Gibeonites.
Don't they have a king?
A lot of theologians think they didn't have a king. They were leader run. Not sure how they got their leaders. Probably their leaders weren't called kings, but they didn't apparently call them kings.
Mayors.
Yeah, kind of like mayors. Don't know if they were elected, or because if you're not elected, if you're just chosen and for life, you're a king. I don't know. But they don't call them kings. So the Israelites trusted their senses instead of trusting God. Can always get us in trouble. Gets us in trouble today when we trust our senses. And the real problem was they didn't talk to God about it, because God has said, no, kill them all. They're right here, kill them. Every time these guys don't ask God, they get in trouble. You'd think they would have learned by now. I mean, and Joshua just read them the law.
And Joshua made peace with them.
Yeah.
That stuff was already old. Why did Joshua take all that old stuff?
Oh, so the men took some of their provisions. There's some discussion about whether that meant the Israelites gave them stuff or they took. To take something from an envoy would mean you're making a treaty with them, even if it's crummy old stuff. But you're accepting a gift from them. So envoys brought gifts, usually not stale bread and burst wine skins, but they would have brought something, which is another reason that was a fishy story. They would have brought something from their kingdom. But okay, next set of verses is 16 through 20.
3 days after making the treaty with them, they heard that the Gibeonites were their neighbors living among them. So the Israelites set out and reached the Gibeonite cities on the third day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Shepherah, Beeroth, and
Yeah, that one.
yeah, that one. That took me a letter. But the Israelites did not attack them because the leaders of the community had sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. Then the whole community grumbled against the leaders. All the leaders answered them, "We have sworn an oath to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we cannot touch them. This is how we will treat them. We will let them live, but so that no wrath will fall on us because of the oath we swore to them."
Okay, so that's it.
Okay.
So the Israelites are going on the road, ready for their next adventure, and their next adventure probably would have been the Gibeonites, and nope, can't attack them. They discover they've been deceived. Now, a lot of people would think, well, we've been deceived. They tricked us. We should be able to kill them. But no, they made an oath to God. They have to honor it. And so here we also see that Gibeon is a land because it has four other cities mentioned besides the city of Gibeon. So if they had attacked, that would have piled a second sin on the first one of making a treaty in the first place. And then breaking the treaty would have been a second sin. But the people don't like it at all. They mumble, grumble. These guys are really good at mumbling and grumbling. They inherited it. They aren't happy. More of the Moses attitude thing coming through. Maybe they were upset because Gibeon would have been lots of riches there, and now they're not going to get any of them.
Okay, but what about the land? Now it was easy to confiscate that land.
They're gonna end up leaving the Gibeonites in that land. Eventually, one of the tribes is going to settle there. What we've seen so far, well, Jericho completely destroyed, Ai completely destroyed. They're going to conquer cities and not inhabit them right away, which is going to cause a problem later. What's that?
They're supposed to kill everybody.
They're supposed to kill everybody, but apparently there's enough where the tribes are later going to have to come back and reconquer these cities because they leave them open.
Because of the oath, the Gibeonites couldn't hurt the Israelites either.
Right. It's a mutual thing. They agreed to become slaves, to do whatever the Israelites wanted them to do. The leaders don't bow to the pressure of the people. They say, we have to keep this oath, or God's going to be really mad at us, and we don't want God really mad at us. We'll take you mad at us over God mad at us. Later in history, King Saul is going to go after the Gibeonites and they cry out to God, and the result is God brings a famine on the land that lasts until David comes along and resolves the issue. God wanted them to keep their oath, even though they shouldn't have made the oath in the first place. God is serious about people keeping their promises. Several times in the New Testament, it pretty much says, don't take an oath. Your word should be your word. It should be your bond. You shouldn't have to take oaths. Whatever you say you do, you should do.
Well, we're not supposed to break our vows when we make them.
What's that?
We're not supposed to break our vows
Right.
when we make them, so why should you make a vow if you...
Yeah. Be careful when you make a vow, because, yeah. And is there a real reason you need to? I mean, there's wedding vows. That's. And we're not going to get into
Wedding vows.
breaking away of wedding
Well,
vows,
yeah,
but yeah, that's an example of a current place that you take vows, but you take an oath when you join the military. You better not break that oath.
But I mean, just a casual, oh, I'll do,
Yeah, if you say you'll do something,
Yeah.
you need to do it, because people should be able to say, well, they said they'd do it, and I trust that they'll do it. Okay, this is verses 21 through 27.
So they also said, let them live. So the Gibeonites became woodcutters and water carriers for the whole community, as the leaders had promised them. Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said to them, why did you deceive us by telling us you live far away from us when in fact you live among us? Therefore you are cursed and will always be slaves, woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God. To what?
Through 27.
The Gibeonites answered him, it was clearly communicated to your servants that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land before you. We greatly feared for our lives because of you, and that is why we did this. Now we are in your hands. Do to us whatever you think is right. This is what Joshua did to them. He delivered them from the hands of the Israelites, and they did not kill them. On that day, he made them woodcutters and water carriers, as they are today, for the community and for the Lord's altar at the place he would choose.
Okay, so Joshua couldn't kill them, but he sure could put them to work. Now, cutting wood for the sacrificial fires and carrying water. In the Middle Eastern culture, that's woman's work. So they are being made to do what's considered the lowliest of the low work. But they don't grumble because they're alive. They know what has happened to everybody else. It's not right to deceive and to lie, but I mean, what other options did they have if they wanted to live?
And they're still doing it today.
Yeah. Now they are going to continue to be part of Israel throughout, and they're accepted into the community. There's no evidence of them trying to bring their pagan ways in. A lot of the other pagan nations around did, but it seems like they kind of mix in and accept the Jewish ways. The city of El Jib, which is where Gibeon was, they dug under that, and they have found archaeological evidence that area has been continuously occupied since the Exodus, with no evidence of what's called a full destruction layer. Like if you dig where Jericho was, there's a destruction layer. Pretty much every other town that is listed, if they can find it on a map, destruction layer, not Gibeon. So they were not burned down like everybody else was. Later, the Ark of the Covenant is going to be housed at Gibeon. It becomes an important city. One of David's mighty men, his personal soldiers, was a Gibeonite. Gibeonites were there to help Nehemiah build the wall. So even though it was a mistake for Joshua to make this treaty, God took that mistake and he used it. God still takes our mistakes and he can turn it into something to glorify himself. Or we can wallow in it and make it something bad. But if we turn it over to God, he'll use it. Maybe to strengthen you, maybe to strengthen someone else.
That's the other promise. Give me your burdens.
Yep.
But they were cutting the wood and the water for the house of the,
For the
and
tabernacle.
So, and I know mine says, yet they were cursed, but yet it was a blessing because of
Yeah, they got to serve God.
because
Yeah.
of what they were doing.
By doing women's work. But they got to serve God. And they do it willingly. So they're a lot better at not grumbling than the Israelites are. Okay, Joshua 10. We're going to go on to battles. We've got the Gibeonites. And you would assume the Gibeonite soldiers joined them too. Because in here, well, in this chapter, we find out the Gibeonites had mighty men, which meant they're really good soldiers. So you can bet they put them to work fighting for them. Okay, so verses 1 and 2.
1 through 22?
1 and 2.
Okay.
Sorry. You thought you were going to be reading all day. Huh?
Now Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it, doing to Ai and its king as he had done to Jericho and its king, and that the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and were living near them. He and his people were very much alarmed at this because Gibeon was an important city like the one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all of his men were good fighters.
Yeah, so Adonizedek is saying, oh, we're in even more trouble because the Gibeonites just caved in. It's not like, oh, let's go try this too. Let's go save our lives. I don't think it would have worked a second time. If you remember back to the story of Abraham, after he had beat the 5 kings and he was coming back, he met up with the king of Salem, Melchizedek.
Yeah.
Zedek. Notice the same root. Maybe this king is a descendant. Don't know. But he is the ruler of Jerusalem, which is Salem. So it all ties back together. This is the first time Jerusalem is named. Every other time before this has been Mount Moriah or Salem. So now we have Jerusalem. And this king is right to be afraid. This army's coming for him. He'd heard how Jericho and Ai had been completely destroyed. And it was because God had placed a judgment on the Canaanites. And nope, he's a Canaanite. So he knows their God has put a curse on them. So, and again, the nation has been cut in two. No help from the north. During World War I, a British general, field marshal actually, he used that same strategy. He cut Israel in two when he was trying to liberate Palestine. So that the nation couldn't unite and fight against him. And it worked successfully then too. So, and then we get more detail about the Gibeonites, how strong their city was, how powerful their men were. And if they couldn't stand up to the Israelites, what chance did he have? Now, while knowing the power of the name of God made the Gibeonites want to make a treaty, it makes Adonizedek want to fight harder, like a cornered animal. And Gibeon is only 6 miles away. It's pretty close. So he's probably knowing he's next on the list to go. Okay, verse 3 through 5, Betty.
Therefore, Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent word to Hokum, king of Hebron, and to Hiram, king of Jarmuth, and to Zappiah, king of Lachish. I guess you gave these words.
Yeah.
And to the king of Eglon, saying, come up to me and help me, and let us attack Gibeon, for it has made peace with Joshua and with the sons of Israel. How far?
Through 5.
So the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered together and went up, they with all their armies, and they camped by Gibeon and fought against it.
Okay.
I just want
Good job, Betty.
a long time ago when I came
Say the same
to
words.
my English teacher, I never forgot, she says, Dottie, PH always stands for F.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so while cutting the nation in half, that prevented the North from joining the battle. The South, they did all band together, which is a smart strategy. But it also makes things really great for the Israelites because they're going to fight all 5 of them at once and be done with it. Not have to go through battle after battle after battle. They're still going to be doing some of that, but and it's not unusual. They have letters from Adonizedek to Pharaoh from a different time asking for help with security, asking to make a treaty and can you come protect us? These letters are part of what's called the Amarna letters. And they're pretty literate, these letters. And it's like, oh, they knew how to speak and make sense. And this is more evidence that the Canaanites were organized as city-states. Because you see how many kings are in this small little area. Where normally you'd have a king over all of the area, but nope. They got 5 kings in that little area. And each of these cities is an important city along a trade route. That's where you tended to build cities anyway. And these other cities are southwest of Jerusalem, but within 30 miles. So they're not too far away. Now, they didn't want to attack Jerusalem. They didn't want to attack the Israelites. Way too much power. They decide they're going to attack the Gibeonites.
Because the Gibeonites had sided with Israel.
They kind of hope to make an example of the Gibeonites. Here's what happens if you don't stick with the rest of us ites. Didn't work that way. So Gibeon was on a plateau called the Plateau of Benjamin, and whoever controlled this plateau controlled the whole hill country, controlled the trade routes and everything else. So the ites are thinking, well, if we conquer Gibeon before the Israelites can rescue them, we got it made. But they forgot about God. So verse 6.
And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp of Gilgal, saying, Do not forsake your servants. Come up to us quickly. Save us and help us. For all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have gathered together against us.
So major SOS, help!
This says, do not relax your hand from your servants.
Yeah, protect. We made this treaty. Come. It's time to fulfill it. And if you remember, Gilgal is the base camp for the Israelites. So they keep going back to Gilgal. They don't drag the whole camp everywhere they're going. They leave the women and some of the army there to protect them. So the Gibeonites are not too proud to ask for help, so they do. And Joshua, being an honorable man, if he wasn't honorable, he could have just kind of taken his time and not rushed to help them, and then they'd be gone, and then the problem of having a treaty that he shouldn't have had, that would be gone. Yeah. But that's not honorable. In a way, this is a picture of Jesus too. When the Gibeonites knew they were headed for trouble, they called out to Joshua, and they received a promise of protection. When a sinner realizes they're in trouble, they can call out to God, call out to Jesus, and they'll receive protection from him. So, another picture of Jesus. Okay, so verse 7 is Joshua's reaction.
My turn?
Yeah.
So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men.
Okay, they're marching to the rescue. And this is the first example of a counterattack by the Israelites. So far, every time they've done the attacking, this time they're going to come in and counterattack. And Joshua pulls his best men. He is really fulfilling his oath. He's not even saying, okay, we'll try our best, but not really. He has such a high sense of honor. It's an example to us too. We should have that high sense of honor. Even though we can slack off and fulfill our promises, no, we should fulfill our promises with gusto and with honor. And when it talks about a march, he and his men went with him. They're going to go, actually I have it written down somewhere else. It's a good distance and it's way uphill. And that they're going to be going. So it's not easy. Okay, verse 8.
The Lord said to Joshua, Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hands. Not one of them will be able to withstand you.
Okay, so Joshua's still getting marching orders from God. Good thing. He talked to God. In fact, the Lord is mentioned 13 times in this chapter. So this is one of those redemption chapters where, they didn't do the right thing last chapter. Back around on the cycle, doing the right thing and talking to God. They're keeping their eyes where they need to be this time. And when the Lord says, do not fear them, that is a command, a very strong command. And it could be scary. They're facing a confederation of 5 kings.
Yeah.
Nothing to God. And with this command comes a promise. You've already won. It's not even you're going to win. You won. And that's not a new promise. God promised them a long time ago, you're going to win this whole thing. It's a renewal of that promise. They need reminders. just like sometimes we need reminders. For them, fear was disbelief in God's word. It is still, when we're afraid, we're not trusting God. And I know I have my moments of fear, so it's something I need to turn around and trust God and trust that He'll take care of it. So this is going to be good for the Israelites. Yeah, again, they don't have to fight these guys one at a time. They get to fight all 5 of them and get the bulk of the fighting over at once, which is nice. So verse 9 says, so Joshua came upon them suddenly, having marched up all night from Gilgal. So they are all in to help these Gibeonites. They march all night, and they had to climb, here's where it is, 3,300 feet over about 20 miles. So it is an uphill march. It would take 8 to 10 hours of marching to do this. Not easy. But they're going to fulfill their oath. Okay, now for the fighting part. Verse 10 to 11.
And the Lord threw them into a panic before Israel, who struck them with a great blow at Gibeon, and chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth Horon, and struck them as far as Ezek and Bekeka. And as they fled before Israel, while they were going down the ascent of Beth Horon, the Lord threw down large stones from heaven on them as far as Ezek, and they died. There were more who died because of the hailstones than the sons of Israel killed with the sword.
So this is going to be the last battle that we get much detail of in Joshua. The rest of it's going to be more of a summary, but this is a good one. Imagine the faces of the 5 kings when they see the Israelites coming up behind them. They thought, some think that because it says they came up behind them, that the Israelites marched down and around, not a straight shot, so that they would come up behind. Something that's interesting in here is all the verbs in here are singular, indicating God is the one behind all the action. Now they're doing their part, but God is really controlling this thing. God is the one who confused them.
Hailstones.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
Well, even confused, pursued, it's indicating God is the one in this pursuit. And when these guys escape, they aren't running toward their cities. You would think they'd want to run to their cities and get in walls, but nope, they're just confused as all get out. Well, and the Israelites seem to have cut off their escape routes.
And this my version said, and the Lord threw them into a panic.
Yeah. So they're not thinking, they're just running. When it says the ascent of Beth Horon, there's actually 2 towns of Beth Horon, one at the beginning and end of this trail. So it's talking about the area between them. And then the hail. Anyone that survived the attack, they got hit by hail. Now we'll see, not everybody died from hail, but it killed more warriors than the Israelite soldiers had up to that point. And it didn't hit the Israelites.
I know, isn't that fun?
I mean, people will try to explain away and, it was just hail. How did it not hit the Israelites?
Yes.
And how did it come at the exact right time?
Another one of God's mysterious ways.
Mm-hmm. But it had to be God. One theologian said they were guided missiles. Now, the Canaanites were really into worshiping nature gods. So their nature god Hadad and Baal were the storm gods. Did they think, we're being attacked by our own gods? Well, those gods aren't doing you any good because they aren't real. Now, the largest hailstone ever recorded was 1.67 pounds in Kansas
Wow,
in 1980.
that sounds like something might happen in Kansas.
But in India in 1888, 250 people were killed by hailstones.
Wow.
In Revelation 16, talks about hailstones. They are going to weigh over 100 pounds.
Oh,
So if we're here, you don't want to be out in that hailstone. I don't know if you can be inside in that hailstone. You want to be at the bottom of a 20-story building or something. So hailstorms. Okay, verses 12 through 15.
On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon, O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord had listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to a camp at Gilgal.
So seeing these hailstones and how much their success they're having, but there's guys escaping. Now, normally in a battle, once it got dark, you could start hiding. And I'm sure that's what the Canaanites are thinking. Okay, it's going to get dark any second. I can get away. Well, Joshua doesn't want that to happen. He wants to finish the battle. So he asked God. Takes a lot of guts to ask God for something like that, and have the faith that it's going to happen. This is a man of faith. That, my gosh, if only we had that kind of faith. The sun and the moon had stood as witnesses of the sin and corruption of man, especially these Canaanites. And now, through God, they are going to help complete this victory. And Joshua doesn't go into a cave or a tent or something and pray silently. No, he asks in front of everybody. He's not afraid. So a lot of people try to explain this miracle that the sun stops. They think, well, maybe the Earth's rotation slowed. Maybe the axis tilted a little. Maybe it was just a reflection of light. Maybe it's a reflection of God's light during the day. And scientists are saying it could not have happened because if the Earth had stopped, things would start flying in the air and you'd get tidal waves going and everything. But this is God controlling this. It's a mystery of God. How could this happen?
All he has to do is put his finger down and stop the Earth from going around.
Well, but scientists would say you stop it and gravity goes away. Everything flies. But God can keep the gravity there and the Earth still.
Yeah, you just have to realize he can do it.
One theologian said this was kind of like a sustained meteor show, and they were going through like the train of a comet. And he said there's records among ancient Americans that speak of an extraordinarily long night. Because if it's day on one side of the earth, it would be night on the other. Chinese writings have a legend of a long day. Babylonian and Persian documents record the legend of a miraculously long day. Herodotus, who was a historian a little after Jesus, he says an Egyptian priest showed him temple records that recorded a day twice as long as a normal day. So there's evidence that something like that happened. Now, how it happened, we don't know. But God made it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. He controlled it. And so that Joshua and his men could go get everybody. And here's another place where the Canaanites would be thinking, we have a moon god, we have a sun god, and they turned it against us too. But it's only one God. And yes, he had turned against them. Now, Joshua didn't ask God to do the fighting for him. He said, just hold the sun still so we can finish this fight. We're going to go do it. He just wanted a miracle.
You got it.
Yeah. How many times have you wished, oh, I wish there was more time. I need more time today. Well, usually it's for selfish reasons, but all of Joshua's reasons were meant to glorify God. So that he could obey in completeness and he could finish his work. And then the people would triumph. Now, it mentions that book of Jasher. There actually was a book that, well, the Bible says there was. But they had ancient copies of it. It seemed to be a book of like war journals. It's also mentioned war journals, like their strategies and things, and war poems. It's also mentioned in 2 Samuel 1:17, and it's been lost. But it seems like the reason he brings it up here is like, if you don't believe it, read it in the book. It's in the book. For us, it's like, it's on the internet. Go look at it. It's on the internet. And it says they returned to Gilgal at this point.
Yeah.
Probably not. It might have been the end of the quotation in the book. The book might have been saying, okay, this happened, and then they went to Gilgal. But they don't go back to Gilgal yet. They got mopping up to do and finishing the battle.
It anticipates the ending of the battle.
Yeah, if it's part of the quote, then they probably the book didn't cover everything in between. Okay, so we got the armies on the run, and let's see what happens, verses 16 through 21.
During the battle, the 5 kings escaped and hid in a cave at Makkedah. When Joshua heard that they had been found, he issued this command: cover the opening of the cave with large rocks and place guards at the entrance to keep the kings inside. The rest of you continue chasing the enemy and cut them down from the rear. Don't give them a chance to get back to their towns, for the Lord your God has given you victory over them.
Through 21.
So Joshua and the Israelite army continued the slaughter and completely crushed the enemy. They totally wiped out the 5 armies except for a tiny remnant that managed to reach their fortified towns. Then the Israelites returned safely to Joshua in the camp at Makkedah. After that, no one dared to speak even a word against Israel.
Okay, so I think it might be Makkedah, like Armageddon. I think that may be what it is. I'm not sure. So since the previous evening, these Israelites have traveled over 50 miles up and down hills and fighting, and but they want to get this done. So they come across the 5 fleeing kings. They apparently stuck together, and they hide in a cave, and they're caught there. You'd think that'd be like, oh yay, victory. Joshua is not going to let that distract him from destroying everybody. If you take the time to take care of the kings, other people escape. Got to take care of those. So he rolls up, has stones rolled in front of the cave. He assigns guards. He says to his soldiers, get this done, but you don't stay yourself. You go back out and fight. Take care of these Canaanites before they flee into their cities. And so they killed them all.
Except for a tiny remnant.
Yeah. Now, verse 21, I don't know if yours use the word, mine says all. all the people returned. No Israelite casualties. Um,
Mine says the whole army.
yeah, because they wouldn't have been bringing all the people. So in this case, the people are the army. So, but all the army.
Yeah, all.
Yeah. And in Hebrew, where it says, not a man moved his tongue against any of the people of Israel, in Hebrew it really says that not even a dog would bark against them. And dogs were thought of as just grungy, miserable animals. They were not cute pets. So next week we're going to pick up and find out what happens to those kings now that everybody else is taken care of. We're going to start in verse 22. Okay, let me shut this off.